There was a time when a man unlike any other walked the earth. His name was Job, and the land where he dwelt was called Uz. It was not a famous place, nor a city of kings. It was a region in the east, where the desert met the grasslands, and where the wind carried stories of distant caravans. But what made that corner of the world special was not its geography. It was the man who lived there. Job was blameless, upright, a man who feared God and turned away from evil. These 4 phrases defined him, not because he proclaimed them, but because heaven itself spoke them over him. In all the earth there was no one like Job. His integrity was not a mask. His righteousness was not a performance. From the deepest part of his being, Job loved his Creator with a devotion that never wavered. And God knew it, and God saw it. And God was about to boast about him. Job's household was a kingdom in miniature. 7 sons ran through his courtyards. 3 daughters adorned his halls with laughter. Each of them had grown up under the shadow of a father who prayed for their souls before dawn, because Job had a custom that none of his neighbors fully understood. When his children held feasts in their homes, rotating from brother to brother according to the days of the week, Job would wait. And when the celebrations ended, he would rise early in the morning. He would light the fire on the altar. He would sacrifice burnt offerings, 1 for each son, 1 for each daughter, 10 offerings burning beneath the stars. And as the smoke rose, Job would whisper a prayer that only God could hear. Perhaps my children have sinned in their hearts. Perhaps they have cursed God without knowing it, and I must intercede for them. This is what Job did every single day, without exception, without weariness. A father's love transformed into liturgy, but Job's wealth was not limited to his offspring. His possessions were legendary. 7,000 sheep grazed on his hills. 3,000 camels traversed his trade routes. 500 yoke of oxen plowed his fields. 500 female donkeys carried his goods, and his servants were so numerous that no one could count them. Job was the greatest of all the people of the East. His name was spoken with reverence in the marketplaces. His counsel was sought at the city gates. Young men fell silent when he passed by. Elders rose to their feet in his presence, because Job was not merely rich, he was wise, he was just. He was the kind of man who made widows weep with gratitude and brought smiles to the faces of orphans. His right hand rescued the needy, his voice defended the oppressed, and his heart belonged entirely to God. Everything seemed perfect. Everything seemed blessed. But something was about to change in the heavenly places, something that Job would never know while he drew breath upon the earth. There came a day when the sons of God presented themselves before the Almighty, angels of light, beings who existed before time began, creatures whose very presence made the stars tremble, and among them, walking with brazen confidence, someone appeared who did not belong. Satan, the adversary, the accuser of the brethren, the one who was once an anointed cherub and now roamed the earth seeking whom he might devour. God watched him enter. God allowed him to approach. And then he spoke a question that would echo through eternity. Where have you come from? The voice of the Creator did not tremble. There was no surprise or fear, only absolute authority. And Satan answered with a mixture of arrogance and caution. From roaming throughout the earth and walking back and forth in it, he had been watching, studying, searching for cracks in the faith of mortals. And God, knowing exactly what he was doing, pointed downward, toward a specific spot on the planet, toward the land of Uz. Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil. And then everything changed. Satan narrowed his eyes. His mouth twisted into a smile that chilled the blood. And he spoke the accusation he had come to make from the very beginning. Does Job fear God for nothing? The question was a poisoned arrow. It was not aimed at Job. It was aimed at God himself. Satan was insinuating something monstrous. He was saying that Job's love was a transaction, a business deal, an exchange of benefits. You have put a hedge around him, the adversary continued. You have protected him. You have blessed the work of his hands. His possessions have increased in the land. Of course he serves you. You have given him everything. But stretch out your hand. Strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. The challenge hung in the air of heaven. Satan had wagered against Job's faith. He had declared that no human being loved God for who God was, only for what God gave. And now he awaited a response. What came next no one could have anticipated. God accepted. Very well. Everything he has is in your power. The sentence fell like a hammer on an anvil. The creator of the universe had just handed over his most faithful servant into the hands of his most ruthless enemy. But there was a limit, a line that could not be crossed. Only do not lay a hand on the man himself. Satan could destroy everything Job possessed, but he could not touch his body, he could not take his life. With that restriction burning in his memory, the adversary departed from the presence of God, and he descended toward the earth like a bolt of darkness. Job did not know what was coming. Job did not hear the heavenly pact. Job simply woke up that morning like any other. He kissed his wife, he checked on his flocks, he prayed for his children, and he expected the day to pass in peace. But peace was about to die. The sun reached its highest point when the first messenger arrived, a man covered in dust and sweat, running as if death itself were chasing him. His eyes were wild, his breath was ragged, and his words fell like stones upon Job's chest. The oxen were plowing, and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabaeans attacked and carried them off. They put the servants to the sword. I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. Job felt the ground shift beneath his feet. The Sabaeans were nomads from the south, ruthless raiders, and in an instant they had swept away 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, dozens of faithful servants. The patriarch opened his mouth to respond, but he had no time. Because even as the first messenger was still speaking, the second one arrived. His face was pale as ash, his hands trembled uncontrollably, and the words that came from his mouth were impossible to believe. The fire of God fell from heaven. It burned up the sheep and the servants. It consumed them all. I'm the only one who has escaped to tell you. Job took a step back. Fire from heaven, 7,000 sheep reduced to ashes, men who had worked for him for years, incinerated in seconds. The smoke must still have been rising somewhere on the horizon, and Job could not process what he was hearing, but the horror was only beginning. The third messenger arrived almost on the heels of the second. This one came from the north, from the territory where trade caravans crossed into distant lands, and his report was as brutal as the others. The Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties. They swept down on the camels and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword. I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. 3,000 camels, the backbone of his trade routes, the symbol of his prosperity, gone in a coordinated attack. Job felt his knees wanting to buckle, his mind wanting to shut down, his heart wanting to stop. But then the fourth messenger arrived, and everything before became insignificant. This man was not running. He walked slowly, like someone carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. His eyes were red, his voice was broken, and when he opened his mouth, the words came wrapped in tears. Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house. And suddenly, a mighty wind swept in from the desert. It struck the 4 corners of the house. The house collapsed on them, and they are dead, all of them. I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. Silence. The world stopped. The air ceased to move. The birds stopped singing. And Job stood frozen. 10 children, 7 sons, 3 daughters, the children he had raised, the young ones he prayed for every dawn, the faces that brightened his days, dead, crushed, buried beneath the rubble of a house the wind had destroyed. In a matter of minutes, Job had lost everything. Absolutely everything. His oxen, his donkeys, his sheep, his camels, his servants, and now his children. A lifetime of wealth. The fruit of decades of labor, the treasures of his heart, all of it ripped from his hands with a violence that defied all explanation. And then, Job did something no one expected. He stood up. He tore his robe from the neck to the waist. The sound of the fabric ripping cut through the silence like a scream. Then he took a razor and shaved his head. Locks of hair fell to the ground as tears streamed down his cheeks, and when he finished, he did not scream. He did not blaspheme. He did not shake his fist at the sky. Instead, he fell to the ground. His face touched the dust. His hands stretched out before him, and from his lips came words that would pierce through the centuries. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this Job did not sin, nor did he charge God with wrongdoing. Heaven was watching, Satan was watching, and the wager seemed lost for the adversary. Job had been struck with the full arsenal of hell and remained on his knees worshipping. His faith was not a transaction. His love was not a business deal. Even stripped of everything, Job continued to bless the name of his God. But Satan was not willing to accept defeat. Not yet. The days passed. Job buried his children one by one. He dug 10 graves with his own hands. He wept over 10 lifeless bodies. And every night he lay down in an empty house, listening to the echo of laughter that no longer existed. His wife walked through the hallways like a ghost. His surviving servants whispered among themselves, and Job tried to find meaning in what had no meaning. But heaven was preparing for a second meeting. Once again, the sons of God presented themselves before the Almighty, and once again Satan appeared among them. God confronted him immediately. "Where have you come from?" And the adversary gave the same answer as before, from roaming throughout the earth and walking back and forth in it. Then God pointed to Job once more. "Have you considered my servant Job? He still maintains his integrity. Though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason, Satan had lost the first battle, but he had not lost the war. And his next argument was as ruthless as the first. Skin for skin. A man will give all he has for his own life, but stretch out your hand, strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face." The adversary was asking permission to attack Job's body. No longer his possessions, no longer his children. Now he wanted to destroy his health. He wanted to turn his existence into a living hell of physical pain. And once again, God granted the request. "Very well, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life." Satan could torment Job to the edge of death, but he could not kill him. With that authorization burning in his claws, the adversary descended once more toward the land of Uz. What followed was a nightmare made flesh. Job woke up one morning feeling a strange itch on his skin. At first he thought it was an insect bite. Then he noticed a sore on his arm, small, red, oozing. Before noon, he had 10 more sores. By nightfall, his entire body was covered, from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. Painful boils, ulcers that would not heal, pus that flowed without ceasing. The pain was constant, sharp, relentless. Every movement was agony. Every breath was suffering. Job found a piece of broken pottery and began to scrape the sores, not to relieve the itching, because nothing relieved it, but to remove the dead skin that accumulated over the wounds. He sat among the ashes, outside the city, in the garbage dump where refuse was thrown, because a man with such a disease was considered unclean, defiled, cursed. And then his wife appeared. The woman who had shared his bed for decades, the mother of his 10 dead children. She approached slowly. She looked at him with eyes that mixed pity and fury, and the words that came from her mouth were like poisoned daggers. "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." She wanted it all to end. She wanted Job to blaspheme so that God would finally strike him down and end his misery. It was an invitation to spiritual suicide, a push toward the abyss. But Job looked at her with pain-filled eyes and responded with a question that left her speechless. "You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" And in all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and Job remained sitting among the ashes, alone, forgotten, rotting alive. But then visitors arrived. 3 men, old friends of Job, companions from his youth, respected counselors. Their names were Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. They had heard of Job's misfortune and had traveled from distant lands to comfort him, but when they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him. The man who had once been the greatest of all the people of the East was now a mass of sores, sitting in filth. His face was disfigured, his body was wasted, his eyes had lost all their light. The 3 friends raised their voices and wept. They tore their robes, they threw dust on their heads, and then they sat down with him on the ground. 7 days, 7 nights, without saying a single word, because they could see that his suffering was too great to be expressed. But the silence did not last forever. On the 7th day, Job opened his mouth, and the first thing he did was curse the day of his birth. "May the day of my birth perish, and the night that said a boy is conceived. May that day turn to darkness. May God above not care about it. May no light shine on it." The words poured out like blood from an open wound. Job did not curse God, but he cursed his own existence. He wished he had never seen the light. He asked why he did not die at birth, why his mother's breasts nursed him, why he was given life, if life would be so cruel. His lament was a cry from the depths of the human soul, a howl of pain that would echo through the millennia. And then Eliphaz spoke, "If someone ventures a word with you, will you be impatient? But who can keep from speaking?" The first of the friends began his speech with apparent gentleness. He reminded Job that he had been a strength to many, that his words had lifted up those who stumbled, that his hands had supported the weak. But then came the blow. "Consider now, who being innocent has ever perished? Where were the upright ever destroyed?" Eliphaz was insinuating something terrible. He was saying that Job's suffering was evidence of hidden sin, that the righteous do not suffer this way, that if Job was being punished, it was because he had done something wrong. As I have observed, those who plow evil and those who sow trouble reap it. The theology of Eliphaz was simple and completely wrong. Job responded with the force of a man who knows he is innocent. "If only my anguish could be weighed and all my misery be placed on the scales, it would surely outweigh the sand of the seas. No wonder my words have been impetuous. The arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks in their poison. The terrors of God are arrayed against me." Job did not understand why he was suffering, but he knew he had done nothing to deserve it. His conscience was clean. His heart did not accuse him of any secret crime, and yet God seemed to have become his enemy. Bildad took the floor next, and his words were even crueler than those of Eliphaz. "When your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of their sin." The second friend was saying that Job's children had died because of their own sins, that they deserved to be crushed beneath that house, that God had simply given them what they deserved. The words pierced Job's heart like flaming arrows. His children, his beloved children, accused of wickedness by someone who had never known them. Zophar was the third to speak, and his cruelty surpassed the other 2. "Know this, God has even forgotten some of your sin." The third friend was saying that Job should be suffering even more, that his current pain was a mild version of what he truly deserved, that he should be grateful God had not destroyed him completely. The debates continued. Entire weeks of speeches, of accusations, of defenses. Job maintained his innocence again and again. He declared that his hands were clean, that his heart was upright, that he had no hidden sins to confess, but his friends would not believe him. They kept insisting that suffering was punishment, that prosperity was reward, that if Job was suffering this much, it was because he had sinned greatly. If this story is touching your heart, subscribe now and hit the notification bell. Here, every narrative is a journey through the sacred pages, and what comes next in the story of Job will shake you to your core. In the midst of his agony, Job spoke words that shone like diamonds in the darkness. I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand on the earth, and after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes, I and not another. How my heart yearns within me. It was an impossible declaration of faith. In the darkest moment of his existence, Job affirmed his belief in a Redeemer, in someone who would vindicate him, in someone who would rise on his behalf when all seemed lost. Thousands of years later, Christians would see in these words a prophecy of Christ. But in that moment, Job was simply clinging to a hope that defied all logic. The cycles of speeches continued. Eliphaz spoke again, Bildad accused again, Zophar repeated his arguments, and Job kept defending himself with a passion that would not fade. Till I die, I will not deny my integrity. I will maintain my innocence and never let go of it. My conscience will not reproach me as long as I live. The patriarch was willing to die before admitting a guilt he did not feel. His integrity was all he had left, and he was not going to surrender it to satisfy the unjust accusations of his friends. Then a fourth character appeared. His name was Elihu. He was younger than the other three. He had been listening in silence throughout the entire debate, respecting his elders, waiting his turn. But finally, his patience ran out. He burned with anger at Job because he justified himself rather than God. He also burned with anger at the three friends because they had found no way to refute Job and yet had condemned him. Elihu spoke at length. He tried to offer a different perspective. He suggested that suffering could be discipline, that God used pain to teach, that trials were not always punishment but preparation. His words were wiser than those of the other three, but they still did not have the final answer. And then the impossible happened. The sky darkened, the wind began to blow. The clouds swirled above the garbage dump where Job still sat. A whirlwind descended from the heights, and from the center of that storm, a voice spoke. It was not the voice of Elihu. It was not the voice of any man. It was the voice of the Almighty. The Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Job had cried out for an audience with God. He had demanded explanations. He had insisted on justice. And now, finally, God appeared. But what he said was not what Job expected. Who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? The first sentence was a devastating blow. God had not come to apologize. He had not come to explain the mysteries of suffering. He had come to confront, brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. The creator of the universe was about to ask Job questions, and each question would reveal the infinite distance between the man and his maker. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Job did not answer. He could not answer. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set? Or who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy. The questions continued, one after another, like waves crashing against a cliff. God spoke of the seas and their boundaries, of the dawn and its pathways, of the snow and the hail, of the lightning and the rain, of the constellations and their orbits, of the lions and their cubs. of the mountain goats and their young, of the horses and their strength, of the eagles and their nests. Each question was a window into the immensity of creation. Each unanswered response was a reminder of human smallness. And then God mentioned creatures that chilled the blood. He spoke of the behemoth, a colossal beast whose tail swayed like a cedar, whose bones were tubes of bronze, whose limbs were rods of iron. It ranked first among the works of God. Only its maker could approach it with his sword. He spoke of the Leviathan, a sea monster whose scales were impenetrable shields, whose breath kindled coals, whose eyes glowed like the dawn. Flames streamed from its mouth, sparks of fire shot out, smoke poured from its nostrils as from a boiling pot. Nothing on earth was its equal, a creature without fear. Job listened in absolute silence, trembling, awestruck, terrified. God did not give him explanations about his suffering. He did not reveal the pact with Satan. He did not show him the heavenly scenes where his name had been discussed. Instead, he showed him something greater. He showed him who he was, the God who laid the earth's foundation, the God who controls the seas, the God who feeds the ravens, the God who gives the horse its strength, the God who created the behemoth and the Leviathan. This was the God whom Job had been questioning. And before his majesty, all questions became small. Job opened his mouth, but this time he did not speak of injustice. He did not demand explanations. He did not defend his integrity. Instead, he spoke words that marked the end of his struggle. I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more. But God was not finished. A second storm of questions fell upon Job. Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify yourself? Do you have an arm like God's? Can your voice thunder like his? Then adorn yourself with glory and splendor and clothe yourself in honor and majesty. The challenge was clear. If Job wanted to judge God, he would first have to prove he could do what God does: govern the universe, control the beasts, humble the proud, and Job knew he could not. Job's final response was the most beautiful in all of history. I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, listen now and I will speak. I will question you and you shall answer me. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. This was the transformation. Job had known God secondhand, through traditions, through teachings, through the stories of others. But now, in the midst of the most extreme suffering, he had found something he never had when he was prosperous. He had seen God face to face, not with physical eyes, but with the eyes of his soul. And that encounter changed everything. Job did not receive the answers he sought, but he received something infinitely better. He received God himself. The whirlwind dissipated, silence returned, and then the divine voice turned toward the three friends. My wrath is aroused against you, Eliphaz the Temanite, and against your two friends, because you have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has. The accusers became the accused. Those who had judged Job were judged by God. So now take 7 bulls and 7 rams. Go to my servant Job, and sacrifice a burnt offering for yourselves. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer and not deal with you according to your folly. You have not spoken the truth about me as my servant Job has. It was divine irony. The friends who came to comfort ended up needing the intercession of the man they had condemned. Job, covered in sores, sitting in ashes, had to pray for those who had tortured him with their words. And he did, without bitterness, without revenge. He lifted his ulcerated hands toward heaven and prayed for his accusers. And then came the restoration. The Lord restored Job's fortunes after he had prayed for his friends. And the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. 14,000 sheep where before there had been 7,000. 6,000 camels where before there had been 3,000. 1,000 yoke of oxen where before there had been 500. 1,000 donkeys where before there had been 500. Everything multiplied, everything restored, everything returned with interest. All his brothers and sisters came to him, everyone who had known him before. They ate with him in his house, they comforted him. They consoled him over all the trouble the Lord had brought on him, and each one gave him a piece of silver and a gold ring. But the greatest blessing was not material. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. New faces around the table, new laughter filling the hallways. The first daughter he named Jemima, the second Keziah, the third Keren-Happuch. And nowhere in all the land were there found women as beautiful as Job's daughters. And their father granted them an inheritance along with their brothers, a revolutionary act for that era, a recognition of dignity that transcended custom. And Job lived. After this, Job lived 140 years. He saw his children and their children to the 4th generation. And so Job died, an old man, full of years. The man who lost everything ended up with more than he ever imagined, not because God owed him something, not because he had won a prize for his faithfulness, but because God is generous, because grace always surpasses tragedy, because the end of the story is never suffering. But here is the deepest truth of this entire narrative. Job never knew why he suffered. He died without knowing about the heavenly pact, without knowing that Satan had accused him, without learning of the conversations between heaven and hell. And yet he was vindicated. His faith was proven genuine. His love for God was shown to be real. He did not serve the Almighty for the blessings, he served the Almighty for who he was. And that was exactly what God wanted to prove from the very beginning. Perhaps today you are in your own garbage dump. Perhaps you have lost what you loved most. Perhaps your friends have failed you and God seems to be silent. Perhaps the sores of illness or loneliness or failure are scraping at your skin. Perhaps you have screamed at the heavens, searching for answers that never come. The story of Job does not promise you explanations, but it promises you something better, presence. The same God who spoke from the whirlwind is with you now, in this moment, on this screen, in this instant. And even though you do not understand the why, you can trust the who. Because at the end of the road, what Job discovered was not an answer. It was a person. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. That can be your story today. You do not need to understand everything. You only need to encounter him. If this story touched your heart, write in the comments. I also want to see God.